All right, today we're going to look at the third way to solve quadratic equations, and this is using the quadratic formula. So I'm not going to derive the quadratic formula today. I can tell you it's found by completing the square for the general quadratic formula ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. If you use the method of completing the square and you solve for x, you get x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. So this is the quadratic formula. Notice your quadratic equation needs to be set equal to 0, that your signs for a, b, and c are correct. So let's go ahead and practice using this formula to solve. So we're going to solve x squared minus 4x minus 5 equals 0. This is actually factorable. So when we solve, we're going to get two whole numbers as solutions, but we're going to go ahead and use this method. So what I do a lot of times first is write down what a, b, and c are, because what I see happens a lot is just the wrong numbers are plugged in to the formula. So a is the number in front of x squared, and that happens to be a 1. B is the number in front of x, and that's a negative 4. And c is the number, the constant, which is negative 5. So let's plug these into the quadratic formula, and we get x equals negative b. Our b is negative 4, so a negative negative 4 becomes positive. So instead of writing that double negative, I'm just going to automatically make it positive. Plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. And now we're just going to simplify. So this becomes 4 plus or minus the square root. Negative 4 squared, this should be a positive 16. And then be careful with your signs. Negative 4 times 1 times negative 5 is a positive 20. You can also put everything that's under the radical sign in your calculator at once and just get your answer of 36, which we'll have in a minute. So that would be fine too, over 2. Okay, so we're going to get 4 plus or minus the square root of 36 over 2. And this is where you need to use simplifying radicals that we learned in chapter 9. I said this factored earlier, and this is why the square root of 36 is just going to be the whole number 6. We're going to have two solutions that aren't decimals. So 4 plus or minus 6 over 2. Because the radical's gone, I need to solve these two answers. So 4 plus 6 over 2 and 4 minus 6 over 2, because this can be simplified. This is 10 over 2, which is 5, and this is negative 2 over 2, which is negative 1. So your two solutions are 5 and negative 1. Okay, so let's do the second example. We're going to solve 6x squared minus 2x minus or equals negative 1. So the first thing I need to do before I can solve is move that negative 1 over to the other side. So add 1, it becomes plus 1 equals 0. So it's the only way I can correctly write down what my a, b, and c are. So a is 6, b is negative 2, and c is a positive 1. So we're going to plug these into our quadratic formula. X equals negative b. Again, I have a negative 2, so that becomes a positive 2. Plus or minus the square root of negative 2 squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. Let's simplify this. We get 2 plus or minus the square root. Go ahead and put this into your calculator all at once. Negative 2 squared minus 4 times 6 times 1. And you're going to get negative 20 over 12. Okay, this is now a negative under your radical sign, and that is a non-real solution or answer. So we're going to stop here. We can't simplify anymore, because we haven't talked about imaginary numbers. So we're just going to say, you would say this is a non-real solution. Let's go back. Okay, so let's do this next example. X squared minus 5x plus 3. Again, I'm going to write down what A, B, and C are. A is 1, B is -5, and C is 3. So again, let's plug these in. A -5 becomes +5, plus or minus the square root. You don't always have B being negative, but every example we've had so far it is. So -5 squared minus 4 times A times C all over 2 times A. Let's simplify. So when you put this into your calculator, it's 25 minus 12, you should get 13. Erase some of this. Over 2. And then this can actually not be simplified. The only way you could simplify it is if let me highlight them, is if this number, this denominator, and the number in front of your radical, which in this case happens to be a 1, and I'll write it there. If all three of those numbers are divisible by the same number, then you can reduce this. But 5, 1, and 2, those are all prime. You can't reduce it. So this is as simplified as this can get. So that's your answer. So this is how you would write it on paper. In my math lab, they will have you write your 2 answers. Actually, they won't have you write in, get the eraser. They won't have you write the x. So you would write 5 plus square root of 13 over 2, comma, 5 minus square root of 13 over 2. You have to input both answers. And these are the exact solutions, so I'm not putting this into my calculator and getting a decimal answer. For a word problem, I would do that, but not when I want an exact solution. Okay, so let's look at an example. Profit is an important component of a software company's business. A new company's weekly profit in dollars for selling X units of a new video game is determined by this equation. How many units must this company sell in order to make a profit of $9,000? So 9,000 is the profit that I want. So it's the goal the company has, and they need to know how many units they need to sell in order to get that profit. So I'm plugging in P, or 9,000 for P, and I'm rewriting this equation. This is a quadratic. I want to solve this, so I need to set it equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract the 9,000 over to the other side. And I have my A, B, and C now. My A is the -0.05, my B is 48, and my C is the -9100. So I'm going to plug those into the quadratic formula, and then we're just going to put this into our calculator. So -b, so -48, plus or minus the square root of 48 squared minus 4 times -0.05 times -9100 all over 2 times A. So I want you to put this into your calculator all at once. This is a -48. You would do the plus sign, and then you would do 1 with the minus sign. And when you put this under the radical sign, you actually need to put parentheses around this whole thing to show all of this is under the radical sign. So make sure you have that. And then when you do the division sign, you need to put your denominator all in parentheses. Go ahead and try that. And when you do this, you're going to get 2 answers. You're going to get 700 and 260. And a lot of times when you're doing a quadratic like this, you'll get 2 answers and one of them's negative. And if it's a word problem, we don't say we're going to sell negative units of something, so we would just eliminate that. In this case, we get 2 positive answers, 700 and 260. And if you're a business with a goal of a profit of $9,000, and you could either sell 700 units or 260 units, how many would you choose? Well, why not the less if you're going to get the same amount of profit? So it'd be 260 units that you would need to sell. Okay, let's look at another example. The fuel economy in miles per gallon of a certain vehicle is given by this formula, where V is the average speed of the vehicle. What average speed, so we want to know V, must be maintained in order to have a fuel economy of 26 miles per gallon, round to the nearest mile per hour. So I want my E value to be 26, and then I'm just going to plug this in. Whoops, missed an 8 here. And we have to now set this equal to 0, so subtract 26 to the other side, and you get minus 12 equals 0. We now have our A, B, and C. This is a 75, and that's a V. We're going to plug it in, so x equals negative 0.75 plus or minus the square root of 0.75 squared minus 4 times A times C all over 2 times A. So again, you're going to put this into your calculator and make sure you have parentheses inside that radical sign to show all of this is under the radical sign, and parentheses around your denominator to show this is your whole denominator. You might even need to put parentheses around your whole numerator to show this is your whole numerator. So just try it out and see what gives you the correct answer. So when you solve, you should get, I'm going to round to one decimal place to start, so 63.9 and 21.3. So it did say round to the nearest mile per hour because we don't usually talk about a decimal with our speed. So it's approximately 64 miles per hour. You'll get fuel economy of 26 miles per gallon, and then approximately 21 miles per hour. So both of these speeds will give you that fuel economy that you want.